everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am bringing you guys my end of May wrap up. I have 14 books to talk about today in this video, and I read a total of 22 books in the month of May, which is really amazing. Any month that I can read 20 or more books is an amazing reading month for me. I did want to take a moment to just say that I will be putting a lot of links down in the description below in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. I want to put links for organizations that you can donate to, petitions that you can sign, also links to Black-owned bookstores that you can order from online, because let's face it, these bookstores definitely need our business more than Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also, I always link my Twitter and my Goodreads. I did want to bring that up just because on my Twitter I have been retweeting just amazing tweets from people that are putting their thoughts out there that are much more eloquent than anything that I could ever say. My whole goal here is amplifying others' voices and to just put information out there, because I unfortunately am not the most knowledgeable when it comes to this movement or when it comes to the issues that we have been facing in this country for hundreds of years, and that's nobody else's fault but myself. I fully recognize that I need to educate myself to be a much better ally and a better activist. So that is why I am just trying my best to give you guys some resources that you can use as well to educate yourself. And on that same line, I am linking my Goodreads, as I always do, because I'm pretty sure if you follow me or if you're my friend on there, that you can see my want to read bookshelf. And I have added, I think, about 100 books at this point, both fiction and nonfiction by Black authors or about main characters that are Black. Basically, I've just been adding books to that bookshelf that have been recommended to me either by Black booktubers, Black bookstagrammers, or just on like various websites and things like that. So I highly recommend checking out my want to read shelf if you also want recommendations and if you also want to educate yourself. Now, I'm just going to be honest with you guys, it has taken me entirely too long to really put this much effort into being a true activist, not just an ally. So by putting all of these links down in the description and talking about it on my platform, on my channel, I'm hoping that that helps in some way. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into this, because like I said, I have 14 books to talk about in this video. The first book that I'm going to discuss is Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. This is her second novel, I think, that she's published, and it is a standalone YA fantasy. This is essentially about this fantasy world where there are these libraries that house magical books. These books are called grimoires, and they range from like pretty harmless to actually really dangerous, and if the dangerous ones are like tainted or contaminated in any way, they have the potential to become really scary monsters. And so that's essentially what we have going on here. I don't want to talk too much about the plot just because I don't really want to spoil anything for you guys, but we are centering around essentially three main characters. We've got Elizabeth, and then this guy Nathaniel, who is a sorcerer. Sorcerers and librarians definitely don't like each other, and so when Nathaniel and Elizabeth have to band together to defeat this villain that has developed, it definitely kind of turns into like an enemies to lovers situation. And the third major character we have is Silas, who is actually a demon, and he is Nathaniel's servant in a way. So I enjoyed this. I'm giving it 3.5 stars. I definitely liked it more than An Enchantment of Ravens, which I talked about last month. I think I gave that like 2.5 stars. I also want to say with my Goodreads, I post fairly detailed reviews of every book that I read. So if you want to know more of my detailed thoughts about any of these books that I'm discussing, definitely check out my Goodreads reviews. I will say I had kind of the same issue with this as An Enchantment of Ravens, in that I really was enjoying the first half, but then as the book was going along, I got more and more bored. There was also something weird about like the action scenes. I found myself just kind of skimming through them and not really paying attention to what was happening. I enjoyed the three main characters. I do think that Nathaniel, who is Elizabeth's love interest, I think that he was a bit stereotypy. He's definitely kind of a stereotypical YA fantasy love interest because he's very arrogant and cocky and a ladies man and, you know, very self-assured. So I definitely liked Elizabeth and Silas's characters more, and I did like the ending as well. So I enjoyed it, I just didn't love it. The next book I want to discuss, which was also a 3.5 star read for me, was The Mistress by Tiffany Reese. This is book 4 in her Original Sinner series, which is essentially a dark erotic romance BDSM series. We are centering around Nora Sutherland, who is an erotic romance author, and her various relationships with the other people in her life that are also involved in the BDSM community. I did really enjoy this one, just like I did with the first 3 books in the series. My main problem with this installment was that it was way too long, in my opinion. I think that Tiffany Reese could have probably edited out at least 50 pages. I think the big problem was that the big climax of the story happened and we still had like 2 hours of the audiobook left, which I think is way too much after the climax. I think that the resolution should have been a lot shorter. I really liked the suspense that we had going on. There was like a kidnapping situation, so that was really well done. As usual, I love the characters and I love the character development that Tiffany Reese does within each book. So yeah, I'm still very much looking forward to finishing out the rest of the series, but this one unfortunately was my least favorite. Next 3 books I'm going to quickly discuss are the Selection series by Raycast. This is the first trilogy. I know that there's 2 other companion books in this series, but I don't think those count. I do not plan on ever reading those. And so I did a reading vlog where I reread these books for the first time in like 2 days because these books are so easy to speed through. So if you want to know my in-depth thoughts about these books, definitely check out that vlog. I actually really liked how that video came out because I thought that I had some pretty funny reactions to some of the things that are going on in this series. The first book, The Selection, is definitely my favorite. I gave this one 5 stars, and then I gave The Elite and the one 4 stars each. This is just a fun, messy YA dystopian series. If you guys don't know what these 3 books are about, it is essentially The Hunger Games meets The Bachelor, so it's a much more toned down version of The Hunger Games, I guess you could say. So yeah, just a messy fun time, what can I say? The next book that I want to discuss is Tweet Cute by Emma Lord. This is an arc that I got off of NetGalley, although this book came out probably months ago at this point. I am really terrible about reading my NetGalley arcs before the books get released, but anyway, this is a YA contemporary romance. We are centering around our main characters named Pepper and Jack, like the cheese, and their parents respectively own very different restaurants. Pepper's parents own kind of like a McDonald's, like a mega fast food chain, and then Jack's parents own like this little deli. Basically, the 2 companies end up going into a Twitter feud, which is fueled by Pepper and Jack, but it's one of those situations where they don't know that the other person is running the Twitter accounts, if that makes sense. So this was just really cute, a really fresh and modern YA contemporary. I gave this 4 stars. It was really enjoyable. I know a lot of people who loved this more than I did and gave it 5 stars, so I would definitely recommend it if you're just looking for a fun, light YA romance. The next 4-star read I want to bring up is Dark Lover, which is the first book in J.R. Ward's Black Dagger Brotherhood series. This is an adult paranormal romance series that centers around vampires, in case you don't know. This series has like 17 books at this point, and J.R. Ward is still writing books for this series. So yeah, it's kind of crazy. But I went into this book with very low expectations because I've been seeing people reading this book recently and giving it like 3 stars, so I wasn't really sure what I was going to think of it. Even people who absolutely adore this series don't really love this first book, but I was pleasantly surprised. I gave it 4 stars. I really liked all of the different characters and kind of like their intersecting plot lines. The thing with this brotherhood is that all these vampires have kind of ridiculous names, and so the main character of this novel is Wrath, and then we have Beth, who is a human, and I don't know, I really liked both of the main characters. I liked their relationship. I will say that it was kind of insta-lovey, insta-lusty, but it's also kind of a fated mate situation, so I'll definitely give it a pass, and I am really looking forward to reading more books in the series. I don't think I'm going to read all 17 books, but I definitely want to read the next few books because those are going to center around, I think, the other 5 vampires that we have as a part of like the main brotherhood. Next 4-star read that I want to talk about is Big Bad Cowboy by Carly Bloom. This is book 1 in her Once Upon a Time in Texas romance series. To basically sum this up, this is a really cute and sexy cowboy romance. We've got our 2 main characters, Maggie and Travis, and they first meet at the very beginning of this book at a gala. It's like a Halloween costume party, and so Maggie is dressed up as Little Red and Travis is dressed up as the Big Bad Wolf. They end up hooking up that first night, but it turns out that these 2 characters essentially own feuding companies. They both kind of own like landscaping companies, and so the plot goes on from there. It's definitely kind of like an enemies to lovers situation, but not really, because they don't like really hate each other. So yeah, this is definitely kind of a Hallmark Christmas movie, but a lot sexier. And also I just wanted to say that the sexting in this was like grade A. It was really well done. So yeah, I enjoyed this a lot, and I definitely look forward to reading the other book in this series that's already out. And the next book that I want to discuss is A Duke Will Never Do by Darcy Burke. This is is book 3 in her Spitfire Society series. I also got this as an ARC off of NetGalley. I've read all 3 books in this series because of NetGalley. This final book definitely didn't disappoint. From book 1, I was really looking forward to getting Anthony's story, and so when we finally got his romance in this 3rd book, I was so excited. I will say that the heroine Jane, I thought that she was a bit bland, and a lot of people agree with me on that on Goodreads, but Anthony's character was so interesting and lovable that I didn't really mind all that much. I always say this, I enjoy Darcy Burke's writing style. It's very easy and accessible to read, so if you're someone who's never read a historical romance, I would recommend checking out her books because I think they're kind of a good way to get into the genre. I did end up giving this one 4 stars. I am definitely looking forward to reading her next series, which is called The Pretenders, because that's going to be following some characters that we were introduced to in this book. Okay, and last but definitely not least, I have a few 5-star reads to talk about. I think I have 5 5-star reads, which is pretty unheard of for me because I really don't give that many books 5 stars. But lately I've just been reading a lot of amazing books. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is Little Secrets. This is by Jennifer Hillier. This is also an ARC that I got off of NetGalley, and I think this book came out last month, so it's already out. And this is a mystery thriller that essentially centers around a missing child. I'm not going to go too much into the plot because I definitely recommend going into thrillers blind, but at the very beginning of this book, this woman Marin is Christmas shopping with her 4-year-old son, and her son ends up getting kidnapped while they are shopping, and the plot goes on from there. I thought that this was so well paced. The plot twist was really well done. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say because I definitely don't want to spoil anything, but if you're looking for a new mystery thriller, definitely go with this one. Next 5-star read that I want to talk about is The Raycast by Scarlett Peckham. I'm gonna be very honest, I went into this book with pretty low expectations because all of the romance booktubers that I follow that have read this book were giving it like 2 or 3 stars, and I think that's mainly because people went into this book expecting a very different story, and I'm gonna get into that in a minute. And because of seeing everyone's reviews, I was definitely very hesitant to go into my e-ARC that I got off of NetGalley. But I have to say that I loved this book so much, I couldn't give it less than 5 stars. I did a very detailed review for this book because there's just a lot to unpack with this, so definitely check out my Goodreads if you want to hear more of my thoughts. I think the main reason why it's been getting such low reviews is that this was marketed as a very different book than what it actually is. To me, it was marketed as like a really fun historical romance about this woman Serafina and her group of friends, and how they just don't care what society thinks about them and they do whatever and whomever they want, hence why she is called the Raycast as opposed to a rake, which is like the male version. But I'm just gonna say this right now, this is definitely much more of a drama. It is a much heavier book than I think people were expecting going into this. So Serafina is definitely a radical woman. This takes place around 1800, so her ideas are very radical for the time, and she ends up writing these very powerful memoirs essentially exposing the people that ruined her when she was a much younger girl. And so we learn what made her into the woman that she is today, which at the very beginning of this book, she's depressed, she's an alcoholic, she's definitely not in a great place. But I did really enjoy the character development that we had with Serafina's character, because later on in the book she does get sober, she does improve her life, and you know, she kind of comes to terms with her past instead of letting her past define her, if that makes sense. What I loved about this book was the atmosphere that we have going on, especially in the first part, because she ends up going back to her beautiful coastal hometown to be able to write her memoirs, to be able to, you know, come to terms with her past and write about it. And she meets this wonderful man named Adam, who is a widow. He has 2 young children, and I really loved the development of their relationship. And throughout this book, Adam definitely kind of helps her with her issues, but at the same time, Serafina definitely puts in the work herself. So I really loved that this wasn't another story of a man coming in and saving the day. You know, she definitely saves herself. So I don't know, I loved everything about this book. Like I said, definitely check out my Goodreads review, because that is definitely better worded than this rambly review that I just gave you. But yeah, I just really recommend this. This was one of the most unique historical romances that I have ever read, and I cannot wait to read the other books in this series as they come out. Next 5-star read we have is Love Her or Lose Her by Tessa Bailey. I will be honest, I also went into this with kind of low expectations just because A lot of people were also giving this 3 stars. This is book 2 in her Hot and Hammered series, I believe it's called, and everyone loves Fix Her Up, which is the first book. I really enjoyed it as well, but a lot of people were disappointed by this book because it is much more serious than the first book, because, you know, when you look at these covers, you expect rom-coms, and that's kind of what this series has been marketed as. So we are essentially following Dominic and Rosie. They have been married for quite a few years. I think they've been married for like maybe 10 years at this point, and their marriage has definitely reached a standstill. They essentially don't really talk to each other. The only way that they kind of communicate with each other is when they have sex once a week. And so Rosie ends up leaving Dominic, and Dominic realizes that he really needs to make some changes. And so they end up going to couples therapy. And what's really great is that Rosie also realizes that she needs to make a lot of changes as well. You know, their marriage is not just on Dominic, it is also on Rosie. I have realized that I absolutely adore stories about married couples that are finding their way back to each other. As much as I love romances about people that are meeting for the first time, books like this are just like absolutely amazing. I thought Tessa Bailey did an incredible job with this story. Also, I will say that even though this book does have a more serious tone, there are some really funny moments that really stuck out to me. For instance, there's this scene where Dominic talks about how Rosie can do a really good minion voice, you know, from Despicable Me, and so there's a passage where she like does the voice and it like makes him crack up, and it was just a really fun and cute moment between the two of them. I just can't wait to read the 3rd book in the series. I think it's coming out in a few months. Next book I want to talk about is American Royals. This is by Katharine McGee. This is book 1 in her American Royals series, and this is about if the United States was a monarchy as opposed to a democracy, essentially. And so this book was so entertaining to me, that's why I couldn't give it less than 5 stars. This is essentially a teen soap opera with royals. This definitely gives me like Gossip Girl vibes, also Vampire Academy vibes because of the royalty aspect, so Princess Diaries vibes. So if you like any of those things, I think you will enjoy this as well. There's just a lot of messy teenage drama, and I was so here for it. I'm really pumped for the next book to come out. I think the 2nd book is coming out in September, and I definitely plan on pre-ordering that. This was just such a fun time. And the very last book that I want to discuss might be my favorite book of the month, or at least one of my top favorite books of the month, and that is Undercover Bromance by Lyssa Kay Adams. She's done it again, you guys. I think I enjoyed this book more than the Bromance Book Club, which was the first book in this series. For you guys that don't know what the series is about, we are essentially featuring this group of guys that get together to read romance books so that they can better understand their spouses and their significant others. And this one in particular centers around Braden Mack, who I loved his character in the first book. He is such a cool guy. He has been reading romance novels since he was a teenager. He's, I think, the founder of the Bromance Book Club. We are also centering around Liv, who is the sister of Thea, who was the main heroine in the first book. And so these two characters end up coming together when Liv witnesses a situation of sexual harassment. It involves her boss and another employee at the restaurant that she works at. She ends up essentially getting fired because she is a witness to that event. And so Braden and Liv start working together to try to expose this guy for who and what he really is. And so it's kind of an enemies to lovers situation, but I don't think that they really hate each other. I think that Liv is just kind of annoyed by Braden at the beginning of this book. But this was so good, and this was absolutely hilarious. Oh my god, the amount of times that I laughed out loud reading this is crazy, because I don't usually laugh out loud when I read books, but this was just absolutely amazing. There's this character that's in the Bromance Book Club. He's just known as the Russian. Nobody knows his name. And his character is so funny to me. Yes, he's also ridiculous because there's a lot of like fart jokes in this, which I think a lot of people don't really enjoy, but I found them to be personally really hilarious. Then there's a scene where the whole book club shows up at the farm where Liv lives at, and like a chicken just walks into the door, and the Russian is just like, chicken, and he like cuddles with the chicken, and it's like the funniest thing ever. Like I'm not explaining it well, but I just wholeheartedly recommend this. I know a lot of people were really annoyed by Liv's character, but I don't know, I liked her. I thought she was definitely more likable than who she was in the first book. You know, we definitely see that she goes through some character development, and of course I loved Brayden's character and I loved their relationship. I cannot wait for the third book, which is called Crazy Stupid Bromance. That is coming out in October, and I definitely pre-ordered that. All right, guys, we made it through this end of May wrap up. I hope you guys enjoyed. I would love it if you would leave a comment down below if you want to discuss any of the books that I talked about in this video. I would also love it if you would push that like button and subscribe, and I thank you in advance if you do. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!